In this presentation, we'll take a look at managing users and custom form styles within QuickBooks Online. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars dashboard. This is our new fresh company file. We just took a look at the preferences within it. Now we want to consider the managing of users as well as the custom form styles. To do that, we're going to go back over to the cog to the upper right hand side, and we've been taking a look here at your company. So we've been considering the preferences, most of the preferences being found in the account and setting preferences. We also have the manage users, which we're going to be taking a look at shortly. And just want to note that we did take a look at the custom form styles within the account and settings, but it's a quicker option to get to them here. So if you wanted to make custom forms for the forms that you're going to be giving to clients, such as the invoices and sales receipts, in other words, not just simply use the default settings that are preset up, but customize those forms in some way, you can go directly here and then you can choose the form that you want to customize. Typically, you're thinking about the invoice and the sales receipt. Those are the things that are going to be given to the customers, and you can go through the customization options, say for a sales receipt, for example, and then you can go through the design features and settings here. Again, we might go through this in more detail later. Just want to know where those options are at this point in time. We're going to start to focus on the data input formats here and use the default form settings. I'm going to close this back out and I'm going to exit without the saving. We're going to go back up to the cog again. So we're going to go back up to the cog up top. This time we want to be looking at the manage users. So you'll remember that depending on the type of QuickBooks that you have purchased, what type of plan you have, there's some limits in terms of how many users you could have. So you might be asking, well, how do you add the users? So here we've got, you're using one of the 5 billable users. We have QuickBooks, the Pro setting right now, which we can have up to 5 users. We have the user that has been set up here down below. We can, of course, add the users with the add button. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to add a user here. Now, these are the options that we have. When you first set up the QuickBooks Online, of course, you're going to have the admin account. So you can have at least one admin account. If you take a look at the company admin, if you were to set someone up as the company admin, which is basically the default setting for the person who basically, if you were to set up a new QuickBooks Online account, they can see and edit everything. So they can see and do everything. This includes sending money, changing passwords, and adding users. So that's the one that, of course, you would want to limit. As you increase the number of users, you're going to have some more restrictions as to what people can see. Then we have the standard user up top. You can give them full or limited access. And that's probably, other than the admin, the most often used if you're going to have someone that's going to be data input, putting some type of data input into the system. So they don't have the admin privileges, however. And then you have these options down below. These don't count towards your user limit. So we had 5 user limit. If you want to choose one of these options down below, you can add a lot more people, and it's not going to basically restrict or take away from the user limits. The ones above obviously will. So we have the reports only. They can see all reports except ones that show payroll or contact information. That could be really useful if you just want to basically show the reporting information to somebody. You could say, hey, I'll set you up as a user so you can get into the account. You can just take a look at the reports. You can't change anything. I'm not going to give you the company information. You're not going to get the contact information or the payroll information on those types of reports, but everything else you could take a look at with the report settings. And we have the time tracking only. They can add their own timesheets. So obviously, if you're using time tracking for something like the timesheets that are going to be in the system, then you could set up multiple people for the time tracking. They can then view their particular time information and input that into the system. We're going to go with the standard users, and then I'm going to say next. And then we have how much access do you want this user to have. You can have all access, which is basically, they have access to everything. Then we have the none, and then we have the limited. If you go down to the limited down below, typically the 2 types of limits that we would see is someone working in the customer section or the vendor section. We would typically have those sections separate in terms of the sales cycle and the purchasing cycle. So for example, if you had someone in the customer, then we'd select the customer section. This user can then enter estimates, invoices, sales receipts, credit memos, and refunds. Those are going to be the documents that we would need to be basically generating. Enter charges and credits, create and delete statements, receive payments from customers, fill out timesheets for anyone, add, edit, and delete customer products and services, view customer register and reports, view tax rates and agency settings, use and adjust sales tax and sales transactions and general journal entries, including manually override calculated tax amounts, add, edit, and delete currencies, edit change rates. What they cannot do, they can't print checks. Notice this is on the vendor side of things. Can't print checks, make bills and purchase billable to customers, add, edit, and delete accounts and quantity on hand, view bank registers, see total income and expense amounts on home, vendor, and customer pages, run tax reports or view tax history, prepare or file a sales tax return or record sales payments, set up new or change existing tax agencies or settings, set up multi-currency, perform home currency adjustments. And then, of course, if you were to choose the vendor and not the, well, if you chose them both, then you have the information that the user can do, what they can't do, add, edit, and delete accounts and quantity on hand, view bank registers, see total income and expense amounts on home, vendor, and customer pages. If you just chose the vendor, which would be typically the case, one or the other, then they can do the vendor side of things, which would be to enter the bills from vendors, enter cash and credit card purchases, pay bills, write checks, and view check detailed reports, print checks, add, edit, and delete vendor products and services, view vendor and AP reports, accounts payable reports, view tax rates and agency settings, use and adjust sales tax in purchase, card, and banking transactions, include manually override, calculate tax, sales tax amounts, run tax reports or view tax history, prepare or file a sales tax return or record sales tax payment, add, edit, and delete currencies, edit exchange rates. What they can't do then would be to add, edit, and delete accounts and quantity on hand, view bank registers, set up new tax agencies or change tax settings, set up multi-currency, perform home currency adjustments, and see total income and expense amounts on home, vendor, and customer pages. So we're going to keep it here. We'll keep it on the vendors, and I'm going to say next. And then if you're going to do time tracking within QuickBooks, like they're an employee that's doing time tracking within QuickBooks, you may do time tracking outside of QuickBooks if they're an employee. I'm going to say no here, and then I'm going to say that we'll add the contractor here. I'm going to put them in as a contractor. I'm going to say contractor 1, and we're going to say vendor and save. So we're going to say they're a contractor. We're going to send a 1099. Now, typically, you'd have probably employees if they're going to be using your QuickBooks system, but we're going to set this up as a contractor. So we pay them with 1099 income. Do you want this user to add, edit, and remove users? I'm going to say no, keep it the default settings. Do you want this user to edit company information? No, I'm going to keep that as the default setting. Do you want this user to manage subscriptions? No, I'm going to keep the default setting and say next. And then you can invite them with this information. You're going to provide the first name, the last name, and then the email, and then they'll go through the invitation, and it says, we'll invite them to create the QuickBooks account and password for access to the company, and then as you send out the email, it'll expire after a 30-day time period. Okay, I'm going to stop that. I'm going to close that back out, and I'm going to go back to the Manage Users. So the Manage Users page, remember, is under the cog, and then we're going to go back to the Manage Users. So we're in the Manage Users section. I'm going to close the hamburger to give us a little bit more room. So we looked at the users here. We didn't complete the Manage Users, but that's how you go through the process. Then, of course, you can edit the information as well once in place. Now, you can also have the accounting firm. So you might say, okay, I have users, and then I work with a CPA firm or a tax preparer at the end of the year, and I'd like to set up them. Now, notice that, again, they're going to be tracked separately, so they're included typically as a separate number from the 5 individuals you can have as users over here. So now you got the accounting firm that you could basically set up, and then you can invite the accounting firm with this option. And as you do that, you can see here it says an accountant can be your best business partner, make it easy to work together, invite yours to your QuickBooks. So you can go ahead and invite your accountant, basically a CPA firm or a tax firm. Your accountant and members of your firm will have admin access to your company data. So they're going to basically have the admin access to the company data, basically kind of like the highest level of admin access. And again, you can invite them through this process. And if you don't have an accountant, you can go down here and look for the information or look for the resources within QuickBooks for accountants.